Just moments ago, GOP candidates went at it, debating the future of America, all taking place in the Ronald Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. A historic location and a familiar place if you watched the 2016 GOP primaries. This was one candidate's second time there, Chris Christie, who also ran in 2016. Former President Trump could have also taken a walk down memory lane if he had decided to join. Besides Christie, tonight's debaters, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and Doug Burgum. To everyone watching, thanks for joining us. Welcome to NTD News Analysis. I'm Tiffany Meyer, hosting live from New York City. We've got a lot prepared for you tonight, including an on-the-ground perspective from the debate spin room and reactions from voters. First, we'll introduce you to our special guests. We've got Bart Marcois, former diplomat and advisor to multiple Republican presidential campaigns, as well as to the RNC. Those are just a few lines we picked out from his extensive background. Carrie Sheffield, once a congressional reporter, now a columnist, broadcaster, and a senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum. And Lawrence Wilson, a national politics reporter with our sister media, the Epoch Times, now the fourth largest news publisher in the U.S. based on subscriptions. Thank you all for being with us on this very important night. Let's go big picture first. Bart, I want to start with you. To many, the last debate took some unexpected turns. Ramaswamy got a lot of recognition that night, some calling it a breakout moment for him. How about tonight, though? Any candidates have won in your opinion?
You know, I think the one that had the biggest breakout relative to his position was Doug Burgum. He came out of obscurity and he appeared, he was sharp, he was on the money, he had good answers. He fumbled at the end and then recovered, but I think he had a very good night.
And Carrie, same question to you. Any candidates have a breakout moment, either good or bad?
Well, I thought it was most interesting that Vivek Ramaswamy seemed to get the most fire. He got the most incoming fire. So by that metric, I think he was the winner. I think he held his own very well. I think he also was someone who represents the next generation, and that became more vibrant, standing next to people who were really, I think in some ways, bringing up old ideas. And so Donald Trump was not in the room, but the mantle of the America First agenda is something that Vivek kept saying that he would put forth in the best way. And that's where why I think Vivek is doing so well among the base.
And Lauren, slightly different question for you going into the debate. What were candidates saying they wanted to get out of it? Does it look like any of them got that?
Well, I think most of them did accomplish something that was on their agenda. I think Governor Chris Christie, who took the first question, he started off with a criticism of former President Trump, and that has been his tactic right away in the debates or in his candidacy. He's running, in his words, to create change in the party, and he said no one was willing to take the case directly to Donald Trump, and he certainly did that a few times tonight. Governor Ron DeSantis, he wanted to, I think, flip the script a little bit and go from the DeSantis is sagging to DeSantis is surging. He had recently told his supporters that the fundamentals of his campaign were strong despite the poll numbers slipping. And he articulated strong policy positions, and he looked very strong and very presidential, I think, in his demeanor on the stage. And I would say the same for former governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, who gained some momentum after the last debate. I think she was able to keep that going, and she too articulated very strong policy positions. And among a lot of squabbling in the debate tonight, she kind of came across as the adult in the room at times. And so she projected herself well, and I think she stands to continue the momentum that she has built in the polls over the last month or so.
And Carrie, you also mentioned how a lot of them were using Trump kind of as a talking point. What did you make of that, kind of focusing on this person who wasn't in the room?
Well, this was a make or break moment for them because Trump, let's be honest. I mean, he's up in a lot of polls at 50%, an outright majority in some polls within the Republican Party. And his campaign actually, I just got a press release from it saying that he's calling for an end. His spokesman called for an end to any future debates because he didn't budge anywhere in the last month since there was a previous debate. There was no breakout moment in the first debate where the candidates who were on stage were able to effectively dethrone Donald Trump. So it remains to be seen whether in the next month or so since this debate that will happen. But, to my money, I just don't see that happening. And so I think in that respect, Donald Trump was the real winner of this debate because even though there were a number of attacks that came on Donald Trump, you had Chris Christie taking attacks at him. You had Governor Ron DeSantis taking attacks at President Trump. You had Mike Pence. You had Nikki Haley. Really, again, the only candidate who said that Donald Trump was an excellent president and was kind of really firm in his support was Vivek Ramaswamy. So, and people are saying, oh, he might be a good VP. But yeah, I just don't see any candidate tonight having the ability to move the needle. But, we'll see.
And we'll be right back with all of you, Bart, Carrie, and Lawrence shortly. But first, if you've been following the polls, Trump's counter-programming strategy appears to be a winning strategy so far. Take a look at these numbers from Iowa. This is from a Civics poll. We have Trump up here at 51% leading. The next one is DeSantis following at 14%. Then we have Haley at 10%, Ramaswamy at 9%, and Scott at 6%, and the rest less than that. And then we also have this CNN poll from New Hampshire, where the gap among first-choice picks is smaller. But we have got months to go before the caucus in January, and a lot can happen between now and then. So Trump is the front runner, but former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley's made significant gains since July, according to CNN and Fox News polls, more than doubling her support. She's now ranking third in the first-choice category among likely Republican voters in both Iowa and New Hampshire. We're going to bring back our panelists. We're going to start with you, Carrie. What do you think is behind Haley's rise in the polls, especially since that first debate?
I do think she did have a strong debate on that first debate night. So I do think that was part of the momentum. I think her portfolio of experience being an executive as a governor, being at the UN with foreign policy, I respected what she did, standing up for Israel at the UN, for example, a very hostile place toward Israel. So I think that was part of why we see the rise for Nikki Haley. But I think also, again, that's part of why we saw the rise for Vivek Ramaswamy as well. And I think that's why there was no coincidence why there was clashing between those two, because those were two of the primary winners of the previous debate. And so that was very interesting to see. In some ways, Nikki Haley made some pretty snide remarks, I would say, against Vivek Ramaswamy, saying to him, I feel stupider every time I listen to you. I thought that wasn't very presidential. And especially because she says she likes to say she's more electable than Donald Trump. But to me, that was kind of a Donald Trump-like insult. And so if she's trying to put herself head and shoulders above Donald Trump, then I don't think that's the route she should take. But I do think that overall, again, her portfolio experience is substantive. I like personally something she said today on the healthcare front, where she called for the repeal of CON laws, certificate of need laws. I don't want to get too wonky on it, but certificate of need laws basically create a monopoly where healthcare competitors cannot come in and offer lower prices or new services because of a monopoly that's granted by the government. So she did a great job on that answer.
And Bart, I also want to get your insights on that. Why do you think Haley's been rising in the polls?
I think she had a good debate performance in the last debate, and I think most of the others didn't. But I don't think that she helped herself as much tonight. She seemed too ready to attack. She knows she's in the same lane with Vivek Ramaswamy and Tim Scott, and she spent a great deal of time talking over them and attacking them, and she could have spent that time more profitably. I think that Vivek came out better of those three than either she or Tim Scott did. I think Tim Scott came in second of those three, and I think she came in slightly behind Tim Scott. When you look at what people are looking for, normal people, they're looking to see, is there somebody there that's going to fight for them the way Donald Trump says he fights for them and the way most voters feel that he does fight for them. And I didn't see anybody say, not one person said, I will fight for you. Trump, in his speech to the Detroit auto workers, said it repeatedly. And that's a contrast that I think we have to pay attention to.
And Lawrence, it seems, there's been a lot of focus on the first debate and how that's been helping Haley. But looking at all the candidates, were there any big talking point differences from that debate and the one we just saw tonight?
There really weren't that I discerned. I think we heard a lot of the stump speech language behind everyone's answer. And I've heard most of their stump speeches multiple times. And I can tell when they start resorting to them, and they tended to do that. There were a lot of non-answers to questions tonight as people just kind of went to their standard lines. I think the best example of that was when the subject of support for Ukraine came up, and it was the same old fault lines that we've seen before. Vivek Ramaswamy is the one who's strongly opposed to supporting the war or for further support for the war. Ron DeSantis tries to play a little bit of a middle ground that we want to oppose Putin, but we want to put America first. And the others line up behind a very traditional sort of neoconservative position that fighting Russia serves an American interest, and it's vital for us to do that. And that's what they've been saying for quite a while. Now, there were some new subjects that were brought up in this debate, and so we did hear some things that we haven't heard before, but I don't think they were inconsistent with what these candidates have been saying for quite a while.
And Carrie, turning to you, it seems there was a lot of interruptions tonight, a lot more than the first debate. Why do you think that is, and do you think it served any good purposes for any of the candidates?
I don't think it really served any good purposes. I think the reason why, again, is because they wanted to have breakout moments against Donald Trump and then wanted breakout moments against each other. So, for example, Senator Tim Scott, the rap on him was that he was too nice in the first debate and basically kind of non-existent. And so you could definitely see he was far more aggressive. He interrupted a lot more. He showed a side of him that seemed to be way more aggressive than I've ever seen. Going after the curtains in the office of Nikki Haley, and lots of sparring over the gas tax in South Carolina. So that was a dynamic that you haven't really seen from Senator Tim Scott, because he paints himself as Mr. Optimism. And in a country right now where there is a lot of rising suicides and depression and mental illness, like, people want something a little bit more real. I think that's what he was trying to go for. In terms of the crosstalk with the other candidates too, as my co-panelist mentioned, Nikki Haley was a lot more aggressive also, I think, because she wanted to project more strength, perhaps as a female candidate. That's one of the biases that you see in statistics or how an audience perceives a female versus a male candidate. When the camera is trained on a male, he has to project warmth, and the woman has to project strength, because of the natural gender differences that are real, despite what the left wants to say. So the fact that she was more aggressive, I think she went a little too far. I do agree with what was said earlier on that front. And then you saw Chris Christie coming out a lot more aggressively against Donald Trump and trying to play that lane. I think also trying to fill in the spot that Asa Hutchinson left, because that was what Asa Hutchinson's strategy was, but he didn't make the cut this time.
And expanding on that, it seems Doug Burgum was one who also jumped in a lot. Bart, what was your take on this squabbling that seemed to have been happening tonight?
I thought it was unseemly, and I wish they had not done it. I agree with what Carrie said, that there were people trying to make up for past mistakes. And on the other hand, you saw Vivek trying to be warm and cuddly and say, and essentially came close to apologizing for last debate. I'm a young guy. Maybe I'm a young man in a hurry and a bit of a know-it-all. I've heard you. I get it. I need to stop. I want you all to be part of my administration. I thought that was an interesting gambit on his part. I think that Ron DeSantis helped himself a great deal tonight. He he had people talk about how his campaign has not caught fire, but it has not lost support. He is holding steady, and I think he will continue to hold steady, and and I think he will probably climb a little bit after this debate. I think that Pence and Christie, however, hurt themselves with what Lawrence referred to as the pat answers. They sounded too pat, too professional politician, and they did not come across as warm or as engaged or as anybody that voters will say, yeah, that's the guy that I want fighting for me.
And on that note, it seems Ron DeSantis, Florida's governor, has been slipping in the polls since the first debate. Lawrence, in your reporting, what have you seen as kind of the response to these candidates, and especially towards DeSantis?
The response of other candidates toward DeSantis, or his response about his slide in the polls? I'm not sure I understood your question.
It can be all of the above or whichever you prefer.
Okay. Well, I think his response to sliding in the polls has been to try to project normalcy. He has said that he's the guy who can beat both Trump and Biden, and he likes to position himself as the person who can get the job done. And what he has tried to do is to run on his record as Florida governor, and he does have quite a bit to run on there. He talked tonight about education in particular, and a number of achievements they've had there. And he likes to present himself as a successful governor who would be a successful president. He faces a little bit of a problem, I think, in that he is a sort of a Trump light. He's trying to say, I'll do what President Trump intended to do, but I'll do it my way and I'll be more effective at it. And of course, he's running against President Trump, not Joe Biden. Sometimes you would think that these candidates are already in a general election because they refer to Joe Biden quite a bit. Not as much this time, I think, as last time. But he's running against someone who has still tremendous popularity. And so he's trying to say, I'll do what he would do, but I'll actually do it. And so far, that hasn't kicked him up in the polls. His I'm the electable one has not been apparently convincing to enough would-be Republican voters.
And speaking of Trump, it seems we do have that Trump clip now, so we're going to play that for you all and then have your reactions after.
I will then go to every foreign country where we're paying billions and billions of dollars for their military defense, as I was doing before, and tell them that if they do not massively increase their purchases of Ford, Chevys, GMs, and Jeeps, our troops are packing up and we're coming home. You got to buy our products. You got to buy our products. And that's going to be the least of it.
So that was the former president in Detroit, Michigan, rallying some auto workers there. It seems President Biden was also breaking precedent on a picket line. Bart, what do you make of this kind of rise in unions, and how do you see that fitting into this election cycle?
I think it fits into the pattern of the realignment that has been taking place under President Trump. When he says, I will force them to buy American pickups, American trucks, or we'll bring the troops home, foreign leaders believe him when he says that. When it goes back to the I will fight for you mantra, the union members are looking at that, and what they're looking at is what we've discussed before. The strike is not just about wages, it's about electric vehicles. And Trump called that out over and over and over tonight and said, listen, what good is it to get higher wages if 3 years from now you're completely out of a job because they've changed the nature of manufacturing? It's fine if people want electric vehicles, let them, but to force everybody and to say in 10 years all vehicles have to be electric, it's nonsense, and it will kill your union jobs. And I believe that his approach to those union members is going to work. I think that they will turn and they will vote for him. And I think they will put pressure on their president and say, endorse President Trump.
And Carrie, in that clip, we heard the former president saying he's not going to give any funding to any countries that don't buy American cars. What do you make of that stance?
Well, it's interesting. Certainly the issue of trade deficit is something that President Trump has talked a lot about. And this notion that, for example, with China, when the WTO allowed all these special deals for them, that was really the moment and kind of a turning point when they started to eat our lunch. And, I do believe in free and fair trade. And I think that what Trump has called out is that it is not free or fair. And so, when you see other countries putting tariffs on us and we allow it to happen, when you see, for example, Chinese companies not having the same level of transparency and accounting and yet wanting to be listed on U.S. stock exchanges, this is what puts our country in decline. And so I think that's what he's speaking toward when he's saying, you're not going to continue to eat our lunch. If you're going to want us to be free and fair in our trade, we're going to require the same thing. So that's how I interpret when he's saying that we don't want to just keep being in decline.
And Lawrence, from your reporting, what have you seen in terms of kind of this dynamic where it seems a lot of the new policies, especially under the Biden administration, say the Green New Deals, all these different ones, seem to be making us more reliant or dependent on China, which is an adversary. What has your reporting shown you about those?
Well, there's been a lot of activity and action, or talk at least, and some activity in Congress around this idea that we're depending more and more on technologies that we don't control. And so you saw last year the Chips and Science Act, which was intending to bring microchip manufacturing back to the U.S. because, of course, we're all depending more and more on computer-driven devices. Look at what we're doing here tonight. We're all depending on these technologies, and yet we are no longer the world's producer of them. So Congress has been trying to address that. With batteries for electric cars, it's incredibly complex because you have the minerals, these rare earth minerals, as was pointed out in the debate tonight, which are often mined in countries in Africa or in Asia, and then they are shipped to China for processing, and then they are converted into batteries and sold, or components for batteries, and sold here to the United States. So China has been able to control much of that supply chain. And what many members of Congress are now talking about is finding ways to reverse that. And this is one of the reasons why in the funding bills that you're seeing in the Republican-led initiatives, at least, getting rid of some regulations, easing the permit process, not just for drilling for natural gas and oil, but for mining, so that in the United States, some of these rare minerals, the production can be increased so that we're less dependent on China. As it stands, we do not have the capacity to produce the components for the cars that we're, at least some in the government are, and in some states, besides the federal government, states like California and a couple others, are trying to mandate this rapid switch to electric vehicles, and that really just increases our dependence on China. China, by the way, is something, a word we heard mentioned a lot in this debate tonight.
Indeed, and we'll be getting to that a bit later, and we've got a lot more to cover. You'll be hearing straight from voters very soon and answers to some very big questions. See you shortly on NTD News Analysis.
Stalin, who was one of the worst genocidal maniacs in history, up to 20 million people killed under his reign. He takes somebody who is a threat to him And rather than necessarily just taking them out back and shooting them, they would invent charges against somebody and convict them of that, and then unfortunately oftentimes followed by quick sentences, often of execution. And you see the same thing in Maoist China. You see the same thing in any number of banana republics, Cuba, Central America. It's a common refrain where whatever side is in power decides that they are going to either discredit or maybe even eliminate their political opponents through law enforcement and through the judiciary. And we're in the early stages of that happening right now, but we see many, many occasions right now where federal law enforcement targeting people based on politics. It's an extremely dangerous time.
We're all searching for answers.
I grew up on the Great Lakes. I sat on the shoreline looking up into the sky a lot. It opens your curiosity.
I just knew that there was some power that is deeper than what we realize. That God is bigger than what we realize. We limit God because we're limited in our thinking.
In my soul, I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand better why we're having all these problems in life.
I subscribed to Epoch Times some time ago, and once I cannot help but fall on a title called How Humankind Came to Be. It just makes you realize that we're a speck of sand on a beach.
When I finished that article, I had tears of joy.
When I read it, I was like, wow, because it resonated with me.
It hit me. I felt like, yeah, that's what I think too. I really kind of enjoyed reading the part about the karma, working off the bad karma.
That spoke to me in a language different than you hear in traditional biblical discourse, but the essence is the same.
I'm a Christian, but what Mr. Lee said didn't seem to conflict with anything that I've ever encountered. It gave hope that there is a presence, there is a force.
Look into it. It feels like the right thing to do.
Welcome back to NTD News Analysis. I'm Tiffany Meyer, live from New York City. We're actually going to our colleague now, Steve Lance, who's in the spin room. He has an interview with a Trump surrogate. Let's watch that.
I'm Steve Lance here in Simi Valley, where the debate has just wrapped up. It was at times a fiery debate. There was a lot of exchange. Some insults were hurled. One key point that loomed large tonight was the issue of China. Vivek Ramaswamy, he was the center of a lot of attention, being sandwiched at some points by some of the candidates. Another thing that obviously loomed large was the fact that former President Donald Trump was not on the debate stage. He was called out and addressed by a few of his competitors there. I'm actually with one of the three Trump surrogates who's here in the spin room right now. He's joining us, Kevin Marino Cabrera. He's also the Miami-Dade County Commissioner. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, tell us, what were your thoughts on tonight's debate?
Honestly, uneventful and uninspiring. We saw a room full of people that are campaigning for some sort of cabinet position or something in the administration, and a room full of media and their campaign staff, while President Trump is in Michigan taking his message directly to the voters, to the people that are actually going to decide this election.
So I want to get your thoughts when it comes to the issue of China. The former president does have a track record. How do you think that he will address the national security threat that most Americans feel is top of the list and their concerns going into this election?
No one's been tougher on China than President Trump. Before President Trump came along, all we had was all these sorts of appeasement policies towards China. He's the one that put in tariffs. He's the one that's put them on notice. He's the one that made this an issue. So nobody is more prepared to deal with China than President Trump. Everybody else on stage, again, I think they're just campaigning to see, if they could be Secretary of Commerce, maybe transportation, but none of them have a real chance to beat President Trump because he has a commanding lead of nearly 50% It's unsurmountable.
The former president in Michigan, as you mentioned, he's giving essentially counter-programming to the debate tonight. He's actually trying to appeal and is appealing to the blue-collar voter. Tell us about how important that vote is and if the former president will be able to attract more.
I think so. Listen, President Trump appeals to the forgotten man. When he ran the first time in 2016, it's to the folks that have been forgotten about for so many years, to the factory workers, to the folks that, all these free trade agreements, they've put them out of jobs and been displaced. That's who he appeals to. He appeals to the everyday American. And again, today, while these folks were here with their campaign staff in a room full of press, he was out there meeting with voters, shaking hands, talking to people, to the folks that are actually going to make a difference in states that are going to decide who is the president of the United States.
He's also, in 2020, he had a record number of voters in the African American community, also the Hispanic vote. What do you make of that?
Well, again, I'm of Cuban American descent, and what I can tell you is that folks that are coming to Miami-Dade County, the community where I live and where I serve, they're supporting President Trump and Republicans because they see the opportunities that they provide for our communities. They're not giving us a handout; they're giving us a hand up. They're giving us the opportunities we didn't have in the countries that we come from. And quite frankly, the other thing of why we're supporting President Trump is we're disgusted by what we see from President Biden. We flee our countries, seeing where a president uses his power to attempt to put in jail and all of his political opponents, and that's what we're seeing here in terms of this witch hunt that they've been conducting against President Trump in an attempt to subvert our democracy.
Kevin Marino Cabrera, Trump surrogate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Back to you guys at the studio.
That was Steve Lance for us, and we'll be welcoming our panel back. Lawrence, the MAGA vote is a big factor in this race. Nearly 50% of likely Republican voters have described themselves as MAGA Republicans. That's according to a Des Moines Register poll. What's DeSantis doing to win over these voters in Iowa who could simply vote for the original MAGA, Donald Trump?
Well, he's spending some time in Iowa, or he has spent some time in Iowa, so he's going there on the ground, shaking the hands and doing what you do in retail politics. He's also trying very hard to position himself as an effective executive. He has rapped against President Trump a couple of times, making comments such as, "I'll actually build the wall," in trying to infer that President Trump was not successful in what he set out to do. He has also criticized President Trump for his handling of COVID and pointing out that he, as Florida governor, kept the state open, kept the churches open. And so he's trying to position himself as more effective than President Trump. And his message seems to be, if you vote for me, I'll actually do what you want done. He also makes a point about electability. And you mentioned that the MAGA voters, or you might call them the ever-Trump voters, the ever-Trumpers, there are also a number of Republicans who have switched away from Trump. Now, I've met some of these folks when I've been out following campaigns of DeSantis and Pence, and they voted for President Trump in 2016 and again in 2020, but have said they won't be down for a third round. So clearly, Mr. DeSantis is trying to gather up that segment of the Republican vote, people who are actively looking for an alternative to President Trump. According to the polling, there are not yet enough of those people to make a difference, at least for him. How the campaign will turn in the future remains to be seen. We see that President Trump is polling nationally in the low 50%, in some of the regional polls like Iowa and New Hampshire, a little bit under 50%, still a commanding lead. But that means that there are 50 or 55% of would-be Republican voters who are not sold on Mr. Trump. And Mr. DeSantis is trying hard to convince them that he's the guy who can actually get the job done.
And given that, Carrie, it seems no matter what, Trump is still dominating in the polls right now. That's despite 4 indictments. How do you see that either staying the same or changing as the election cycle continues?
So as to the indictments, I've thought about this a lot. And one of my theories is based on the work of Jonathan Haidt, the political scientist who wrote the book, The Righteous Mind. And that book delves into the core values of what it means to be a progressive and a conservative. And at least historically and on paper, progressives are supposed to be more tolerant, more open-minded, more likely to have a passport traveling the world. Although I think the modern version is different. But one of the core values to what it means to be conservative is that you're loyal. And so each time President Trump was indicted, it actually activated this core value of what it means to be a conservative, which means that you're loyal and that you're loyal for someone who has been mentioned earlier, who will fight for you. And so because Donald Trump fought for the MAGA base, they are fighting for him. And, earlier a few weeks ago, when the indictment came down in the DC courthouse, I was on Bloomberg television that day. And I was asked by the Bloomberg TV anchor, does it bother you that so much of the presidential campaign dollars for Donald Trump are being used to pay for his legal defense bills? And especially money that's coming from small donors. Does that bother you? And I turned the question on her and I said, have you spoken with any of these small donors to the Trump campaign? Because you talk to them yourself, they're very proud that they are defending him. They actually see that they are taking ownership and helping fight against a system that they perceive to be very corrupt. When you look at how the FISA warrants, for example, were obtained, that you had the altering of emails to obtain a FISA warrant, and then just the level of corruption and the lies that we saw coming from the media around, for example, the Mueller report that we were promised, the smoking guns that were never revealed, and millions of taxpayer dollars wasted on these inquiries that proved no collusion. And then the suppression of stories that were legitimate, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story, to have dozens and dozens of the, former intelligence so-called experts say that it had the fingerprints of Russian disinformation, only to have it be verified years after the fact by the New York Times, and to have Twitter suppress it, and it could have been determinative in the 2020 election. So I'm just giving this history to say that's part of why Trump's voters are so loyal to him, is because he has been through the fire. He has been through this corrupt Beltway establishment that has sought to destroy everything about him. So is he a perfect man? No. But he has been through the fire and tested in ways that nobody on that debate stage has been. And I think that's why he gets that name, Teflon Don.
Some fascinating insight right there. We'll be right back with our panel, but now for a special segment conducted by our team in Irvine, California, not too far from the Reagan Library. Let's go to NTD's Bill Thomas.
Thank you, Tiffany. And for folks watching from home tonight, thank you very much for tuning in. It means a great deal to us. Here's what we've done tonight. We've assembled a random group of 15 Republican voters. We've invited them down here to our Southern California studios, and together we've all watched the GOP presidential debate. During our brief discussion tonight, we hope to find out from our group of voters just what they thought about each of the candidates, and if possible, we'll find out if there's anything in particular they heard that really stands out and kind of strikes a chord with them. With that said, let me introduce to you 15 of the brightest, best-looking GOP voters you're ever going to meet. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. It means a great deal to us. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts and opinions with us. And we have a lot of ground to cover, a very brief amount of time to get there. So just right off the bat, just a show of hands. I've already decided who I'm going to vote for, and I know why. Show of hands. We've got we've got 15 people here, late to the game. Everybody knows who they're going to vote for. We'll start with Dodie. Who are you voting for and why?
I'm still going to vote for President Trump.
Even though he wasn't on the debate stage tonight. You had your hand up as well, Tom. Who are you voting for and why?
Same, President Trump, and I think this debate was perfect to see who his vice president pick will be.
And as a result of watching the debate, have we made up, did the debate help us make up our mind with regard to who we're going to vote for? A show of hands. The debate did help. What did you learn about this debate that helped you formulate your opinion with regard to who you're voting for?
I didn't hear anyone who brought up the military, and that was a front topic for President Trump, which I really respect, and I will still vote for Trump.
Very good. And then once again, a show of hands. Is there anything about any of the candidates on that stage tonight that you learned that was something new? You didn't know that coming in. You learned that tonight. Show of hands. Stephen, pardon my reach. What did you learn new about one of the candidates?
North Dakota did particularly well. I was surprised by how well he did. He didn't say anything really against President Trump that was that strong. Some of the others did. They ruled themselves out as vice presidents, essentially.
Very good. Anybody else? They learned something new about Lisa. What did you learn new, and who'd you learn about?
Nikki Haley. I really found her to be, especially probably because I'm a female too, but I really do feel that fentanyl, I really love the Reagan era, but I do feel that Reagan didn't have fentanyl to contend with. And I think it's a real issue that we really need to dive into. I mean,
absolutely, a well thought out analysis. There were 7 people on that debate stage tonight. Somebody walks away a winner. So let's go through each of the candidates one by one. We'll do that in alphabetical order. And the first is the esteemed gentleman from North Dakota. The governor is Doug Burgum. A show of hands, Burgum won this debate. There are 15 people in this room, and nobody thinks Burgum won this debate. You didn't have your hand up quicker than everybody else. So why didn't he win?
The most I've ever heard of this guy was tonight.
Yeah.
I liked what he had to say, but
he's an unknown.
He's an unknown, right?
You didn't have your hand up as well, Michelle. Tell us about it.
Well, I agree that Burgum, he had more to say tonight, but he just doesn't get in there fast enough. I'm voting for Trump, and if anyone won, I feel it was DeSantis on that stage tonight because of the education stance that he takes as a teacher. So
very good. And speaking of other candidates, we also have a variety of other candidates. A show of hands. Chris Christie, he won this debate. Anybody? 15 people, nobody for Chris Christie. You don't have your hand up. Why didn't Chris Christie win this debate?
I think that he's up there just to be against Trump. So.
You also, Robert, didn't have your hand up. Chris Christie, in your estimation, pardon my reach, he did not win this debate because?
I don't think Chris Christie understands what really is standing in front of the American people today, and I don't think he has the ability to deal with it.
Very good. Next in alphabetical order is Governor Ron DeSantis, the esteemed gentleman from Florida. Does anybody think Ron DeSantis, as a result of this debate, he hit a home run, he wins the debate? We got a couple of people. He won that debate. Tell us about it.
Yes, he did. He had almost all areas that he covered were really on spot. I think that he, more than anybody else, has the best chance of winning against Trump.
And somebody else said Ron DeSantis won. Ron DeSantis won because?
I, again, like his stance on education and on parents, and I also like his stance on the border. He said he would, he would send he would go after the border and go after the drug cartels.
Very good. Only one female on that stage tonight. Nikki Haley wants to be the next president of the United States. A show of hands, Nikki Haley won. Nikki Haley did win. How did she pull it off? What did she do? What did she say?
Well, I would say she didn't technically win, but I think she would be the best running mate for President Trump. Either her or else Senator Rick Scott would be the best choice as far as bringing in independents and minorities and female voters or suburban moms. So,
and we need a female president.
We need the best. We need President Trump, actually. You know,
Mike Pence. No one is closer to the White House on that stage tonight than former Vice President Mike Pence. He won the debate tonight. Anybody? 15 people are here, and Mike Pence. None of you say Mike Pence won that debate. Mike Pence did not win in your estimation because?
Well, whenever I see him, I just think of when he had that fly on his head.
Yeah.
I think he wants to take credit for everything that went right with Trump, and he doesn't support Trump. So he's the last on my list.
And then Vito, if I can squeeze in between you, Vito, you didn't have your hand raised. He did not win that debate because, in your estimation?
In my estimation, Mike Pence didn't win the debate because, and all the candidates that I feel didn't win the debate were the ones that insulted President Trump. He's very popular, and it's very insulting to the voter base to go to them and tell them that somebody that they all like is not somebody that they should like.
Absolutely. Okay. Next candidate, going down alphabetical order, Vivek Ramaswamy. A big round of applause for me because I didn't botch up his name. Everybody? Vivek Ramaswamy. Very unexpected. Vivek Ramaswamy, a show of hands, he won this debate. 1, 2, you were late to the game. 3, Joe, we'll get back to you. Joe, you say Vivek Ramaswamy won this debate. Educate the group. You know something they don't.
I just think he has all the right things to say, but there's something about him I don't trust.
Vivek
win a lot of people.
You do think so. Anybody else that was for Vivek Ramaswamy? Show of hands. Anybody else? You. Yes. Pardon my reach. Vivek Ramaswamy, he won the debate. Tell us why.
Vivek really is a businessman. He has learned it extremely quickly, and he's on board with every issue. He might not have the specific answer, but he said, I'm willing to listen and have you all help me.
Outstanding. We recognize the esteemed gentleman from South Carolina, Senator Tim Scott. Show of hands, he won the debate. Nobody says he won the debate. Quickly, Donald Trump, we are running very short on time. Donald Trump should have been here tonight facing his opponents. A show of hands. And anybody here that thinks Donald Trump, can anybody unseat Donald Trump on that stage tonight? And our final question tonight, if you could, was there anything that should have been talked about tonight on that debate stage that was not discussed? You're all satisfied, for the most part. Two people say you didn't hear everything, but for the most part, who won the debate overall in your collective estimation? Was it Ramaswamy? Was it Pence? Was it DeSantis?
Donald Trump.
It's a mixed bag of tricks. There's no clear indication who won that debate. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight and participating. We certainly appreciate it. So there you have it, a group of GOP voters. They give their response to the debate. Apparently, no one has a clear indication about collectively who really won this debate, a very contentious debate. But this group of voters says they will be voting, and they will be voting for a Republican. From our NTD TV studios here in Irvine, California, I'm Bill Thomas, and Tiffany, back to you.
Bill Thomas for us there, and some great insights and fascinating answers from the voters themselves. And in just a moment, a topic that was brought up quite a few times, the Chinese Communist Party, and what to expect from candidates as we inch closer to the Iowa caucuses. Plus, more from the Spin Room. Don't go away. We'll be right back shortly on NTD News Analysis.
Civilizations rise and fall. Millenniums, centuries, decades pass. But humankind's biggest questions remain. Life after death? Destiny or coincidence? For what do we exist? Explore them with us. Mysteries of life.
Where does this story begin?
It's the place you're in, child.
There's invisible forces around us all the time.
And you see it!
We travel with no destination, they say.
Why am I here?
What is the real story of America?
What's this all about?
The culture's gone crazy, media's gone mad, and reason has become repugnant.
This is American thought leaders.
Well, they are not telling the truth.
It's going to take down the culture and the country.
Everything that depends on this technology is failing.
This story, although set in the past, is about the future.
There's reporting that can be trusted. There are programs that can inspire every generation. There is a television network worth watching and sharing. Our commitment is to bring you the facts and to show you the world. We won't be divided by politics, and we won't be swayed by the dollar. We believe in the strength of our nation and the hope in our shared humanity. We are NTD Television, and we are proud to bring you news you can trust and programs that make you smile. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.
What is China like really? Is it defined by its giant economy, an oppressive government, or its people? By the worst persecutors or the most courageous freedom fighters? We're lifting the veil to look at global impacts and how close the regime is to your doorstep. From eyewitnesses and analysts, get the facts. Here on China in Focus.
Welcome back to NTD News Analysis. Just moments ago, Steve Lance had an interview with Team DeSantis in the spin room. Let's watch that now.
So we're still here in the spin room. I'm with Ryan Tyson, senior advisor to the DeSantis campaign. Ryan, what did you make of tonight's performance?
Oh, I thought it was a great night for us. Once again, second debate in a row. One candidate on the stage has a message. It's Ron DeSantis. I thought he did an incredible job. It was a great spirited fight, but it became a scrum again like it did last time. And we look forward to moving on to Miami next.
What is the governor's path forward? What is the strategy? How is he looking at things as Iowa approaches?
We're looking forward to getting back to Iowa. I think we'll be there next weekend. We look forward to finishing our tour of the 99 counties in that state. We're going to be back. We're going to keep building an operation out there, the only campaign that's building an operation right now. And brick by brick, we're going to move ourselves towards caucus day. His style of candidacy, the way he likes to run campaigns, ground and pound, building wins from the ground up, that's what we do. A caucus environment is perfect for his candidacy and the operation that he's building.
Speaking of ground and pound, he took a slightly different approach today. He took it straight to the former president. Was that part of the strategy? And what do you make of that approach?
Well, yeah, it's time for the former president to come out and play. There's been so many comments that are made about polls and this and that and another. The last time I checked, voters are the ones that actually get to make this decision, not polls, not media polls, as bad as they may be. The reality is it's time. It's time to have this conversation. It's unfortunate he's not the same candidate. Donald Trump is not the same candidate he was back in 2016. He's just not. And it's unfortunate the basement strategy they're deploying, but we do look forward to him coming out and playing.
The former president, first of all, the issue of China was big tonight. Yeah. Former president has a track record. What do you think will separate former President Trump and Governor DeSantis when it comes to dealing with China?
Actually acting on it, actually stopping them from being able to purchase farmland in the United States, actually stopping the Confucius Institutes. That's the difference. It's more than just truthing, it's more than tweeting. You have to actually act, you have to actually deliver.
Ryan Tyson, thank you so much for joining us. Studio, back to you.
That was Steve Lance in the spin room for us there, and now let's bring back our panel. Lawrence, let's begin with you. So the Chinese Communist Party was brought up a few times tonight in this debate. Unlike the last one, candidates have recently been talking more about their views on countering China. How hawkish do candidates have to be to do well in these early states especially? And who's meeting these expectations?
Well, the early states are three of the four early states. Well, they're all have rural areas, but Iowa tends to be a very rural state. Nevada, New Hampshire as well, though a northeastern state, and of course South Carolina. And these tend to be law and order, strong military, strong American presence kind of thinkers. So it is something that they have to pay attention to, I think. Most of them are hawkish on China. But it is moderated, as you heard in the debate tonight, because China, apart from being an potential adversary literally in war, is also a business partner. And so the message is that for some of them are trying to take, we want to do business with China, but as we've heard it said, we want to be a free and fair kind of playing field. They all tend to be hawkish on China. Some of the most are probably Pence, Christie, and of course DeSantis, Haley too. I guess now that I start listing them, they really are a pretty hawkish group on China.
And Bart, 30 seconds, what was your take on that?
You know, the discussion on China gave a great opportunity. There was for insight, there was a moment, kind of an obscure moment, where DeSantis was asked a question about big tech and said, look, you know, if we're going after Google and Facebook and the other big tech companies, isn't that giving an advantage to China? Doesn't that play into their potential dominance? And he gave an answer, and his answer was technically correct, but he didn't develop it. He missed an opportunity. He said what he was trying to say was competition among American. Free competition is what will let us beat the Chinese companies. But he swallowed his own message and went on to list accomplishments. There's a moment that shows why President Trump keeps skipping these debates and will continue to. He isn't constrained by these time constraints, and he's not going to list things. He would have taken that and expanded and talked about it and made a joke about it and gone into it at great length so that people really understood. DeSantis may have the capability but to solve some of these things, but he doesn't have the capability to communicate that to voters. And that China question gave an example of that.
And we are under time constraints here, so Carrie, 30 seconds. What was your take on that?
Well, overall, I was glad to hear so much strength, at least in rhetoric, coming from the debate stage about China. I think President Trump, someone should have called out the fact that he did allow Hong Kong to descend into the hands of the CCP. I would like to have someone ask President Trump that question. Why wasn't he stronger on that front? Although he was strong on other issues like declaring the Uyghur genocide, an official genocide during his administration, which was strong and powerful and right for him to do, and also standing up against Huawei and other national security threats and getting European partners to stand up against Huawei and the takeover of 5G in Europe. So there's a lot that the other candidates can build on that Trump did with strength, but certainly there's a lot more to be done.
Indeed, and a final thanks to all of our panelists, Bart Marcois, Carrie Sheffield, and Lawrence Wilson. It's been great having everyone on tonight. And that wraps up our show. You heard from candidates, campaigns, experts, and voters. We covered a lot of ground, and we hope to do it again with you next time. Goodbye, and have a great night.